let me add my welcome to each of you. In these economic times, it's kind of difficult to think about the future, but tonight we are in essence thinking about the future as we see the young come before us. As you know, small businesses represent the backbone of certainly developed countries and emerging countries as well. And so when you see the young come before us, having given their ideas to successful ventures, it heartens the heart to know that our country, if this is a sample of what the young are doing, our country for the future will be in good shape. So thank you, all recipients. It's my pleasure to introduce Brad Neilley, who is co-founder and CEO of Green Planet Group LLC. The company is a global organization that is leading efforts to harness technology for a healthy world by providing total solutions to build infrastructure in many countries globally. Green Planet Group uses the latest innovative, sustainable solar and wind alternative energy technologies to provide electric, lighting, and clean water solutions. Brad brings with him over 20 years of executive leadership experience, having worked for a number of Fortune 500 companies, including Johnson & Johnson and the New York Times. At Johnson & Johnson, he was worldwide vice president and on the management board of 3 J&J companies, with worldwide HR responsibility for the infectious disease business in Johnson & Johnson's Pharmaceutical division. He was part of the executive team that grew the business from research and development to over $500 million in worldwide sales. Over the years, Brad's business leadership responsibility has included years of experience in sales, marketing, operations, IT, R&D, environmental, health and safety, and sustainability in a variety of industries. Brad has run several of his own businesses and has also dedicated years of involvement in long-term community service. He has been active in a number of volunteer organizations, including board member of the Martin Luther King Youth Center, Crossroads Theater, an executive committee member of the New Jersey chapter of the National Black MBA Association. I'm pleased to say that Brad is a Silverman College alumnus. Brad Neilley received his MBA in International Business with honors distinction in 2000. I'm very proud to introduce one of our own, Brad Neilley. Brad.
I thought it would be helpful to do a couple things to actually go through my journey, to tell you a little bit about my life and how I got to where I am today, to talk, because I think that'll help you understand what made me the person I am today, to spend some time talking about what lies ahead, as well as some lesson learned, as well as some key points and key turning points within my life. So I'm going to take you back. We're talking about entrepreneurship, but very seldom does someone become an entrepreneur without some other ventures along the way. So I'm going to take you back, kind of way back, where I grew up, which is Passaic, New Jersey. How many of you know Passaic, New Jersey? Show of hands. Okay, that's good. I grew up in Passaic, went to Passaic High. In fact, that was my first stint at really entrepreneurship. I actually took some printing classes and started a printing business, doing envelopes and stationery and business cards for people. But the real job I had was actually at my uncle's grocery store. It was a small mom and pop store. I was 12 years old as a clerk. I became the store manager, got the keys to the store, opened and closed it, and believe it or not, the first person I had to fire was my brother. Hey, he wasn't doing the job, and I was in charge. But that was my first taste of entrepreneurship and seeing what it's like to run your own business. It was also my first taste at management and getting the responsibility at probably 12, 13 years old of opening a store, closing a store, doing books, managing other people. Right behind that, I started college as I graduated high school, William Patterson University. In fact, for all of you, I think some of the entrepreneurs that we talked about this evening, you were applauded for going to school and running a business at the same time. I went 6 years at night to get my degree, actually working full time. So I can really appreciate what it's like to try and balance both. So I started going to school at night, and while I was going to school, I was also working at a small company called Deluxe Check Printers. Deluxe at the time was about 60 or 70 years old. They had grown throughout the U.S. I spent time there when it was building plants, opening locations. In fact, most of my career there, we opened and doubled the number of locations around the country. So as we opened the locations, the check market itself was a real unique market because 20 years ago, 15 years ago, people really were under the impression the only way to get checks was to order them through the bank. You couldn't get checks yourself. So the banks were embracing that and actually making money from it. In fact, the banks at the time started to make more from check printing than they did from some of their other ventures. So the business grew 70 years, never laid anyone off, never had any reorganization, never had any restructuring. So it was a very robust business. In fact, as the company grew, when credit cards first came out, MasterCard and Visa, what people said was, that's the end of check printing. Why need checks? Everybody's going to charge everything. You're going to pay with a credit card. People stop writing checks. It actually continued to fuel the business because if you think about it, rather than writing one check to buy that TV, now people would charge it and write 10 checks over the course of a year or two to pay the TV off. So it actually fueled the business. When the savings and loan crisis hit, that's the end of check printing because there'll be 5 banks across the U.S. Well, every time a bank closed, much like now, they had to issue new checks for the other banks or new checks for the customers, so it actually fueled the business. So it continued to grow. But as it continued to grow, something happened that changed the world. And we all know what that was. It was the invention of the computers. And when that happened, it really had a dramatic impact for a number of reasons. First of all, we all got connected. It allowed you to connect anywhere in the world to anyone in the world. As that happened and it became a worldwide connection, there were other ways to pay bills, for example, online. And for the first time in the company's history, people were allowed to pay their bills online without having to write checks. Another thing that happened through Amazon, I believe it was, which was PayPal. So not only pay bills online, but directly transfer funds from one account to another. When that happened, it was the perfect storm because in addition to that, people realized these small check printing companies started to emerge and you could order checks direct. So as that happened, people found out, we've probably seen the ads, $9.95, 200 checks. At the time, the banks were charging $20, $30, $40 for checks that really cost them about half the amount. So unfortunately, and I hope there's no bankers in here, but a little bit of greed got in the way. Once all these things happened, even Costco, which I didn't know, started printing checks. Once all these things happened, another occurrence happened, which was computerized check printing. So for the first time in the company's history, there was a reorganization, and the plan was to close half the locations nationwide and consolidate in the Northeast region, where I was responsible for about 2,000 employees, from 13 locations down to 2. Checks were then computerized. Not only could you print them in central locations, customer service facilities that were scattered throughout the country were now centralized, and you could also print checks direct. I also, at the time, started a business while I was working there, and that was my first entrepreneurial activity myself. I think someone here does movie production business. I ran a business, Northeast Entertainment. And the company itself did a couple things. We had professional DJs, we did videotaping, we converted films to videos and DVDs, and did photography, weddings, parties, bar mitzvahs, graduations, dance recitals, you name it. Really terrific business, really growing business. But one of the things I found out as I was growing the business was I didn't like giving up my weekends. And as the business grew more and more, the things I mentioned, weddings, parties, bar mitzvahs, graduations, when do they usually happen? Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. So I got to the point I found that my weekends from Friday to Sunday were filled up. We had 3 or 4 crews that were going out. But I also got the opportunity to find out your reputation is based on what you do. And sometimes you can't control what other people do. So when you train people and you send them out, they're going out with your brand and they're representing your brand. And when someone goes out to take pictures, to videotape, to play records, and they can't start the music, or they come back and there's scenes missing from a wedding, it's a very awkward conversation to have with the bride and groom that you missed part of the wedding. So I realized at that time I had to make a choice. I had to either pursue this full time or stay in corporate America. My role in corporate America was progressing pretty well, so I actually dissolved the business and continued in corporate America. And as I continued in corporate America, I also decided to get into another entrepreneurial venture. Some of us have done this, real estate, foreclosures, as well as, and we've probably seen it, flip this house. Anyone here watch the program, Flip This House? Anyone flipping homes here? Any home flippers? No, not right now, huh? It's bottomed out, it's coming back. So I actually started to buy some property, bought some with no money down, bought some in flip properties. But at that time, much like now, the real estate market was up and down. I became a landlord, bought properties, and started renting properties out. Anyone here a landlord, rent properties? A couple people. So you know what happens when you're renting property and what happens when you have tenants and you fix a place and it's brand new and you go there every month and it's less new. And if you have a good tenant, it's still less new. If you have a bad tenant, it's really not new. You know, and the agita starts to kick in. Or if they lose their job and you're the bad guy because you need the rent to pay the mortgage. So you have all these things that come along with it. Or the call on Friday night or Thursday night before Thanksgiving or Christmas because something's wrong with the heat or the electric or anything else, and you get all the problems. So I also realized at that time that I value, and you have to find out what's important to you. I realized I value my free time. And I decided at that point, at least when I had rental units, that's not something I want to do. It comes back to that weekend thing because I don't want to give my weekends now fixing property and doing the work or paying someone to fix it. But during that time, my goal was to be a millionaire real estate investor. I thought I could grow the business. In fact, one of my heroes was Donald Trump. And I set a goal to actually meet Donald Trump. Didn't happen, but I actually became friends with the third season winner of The Apprentice, Randall Pinkett, who actually lives in Somerset. Actually, I found out he goes to the same church I do. And we became friends. That's actually my son with him at an event that we had him attend. So as I got out of real estate, and I'm actually thinking about getting back into it and dabbling a little bit, but in a different form, more flipping. I also went back to school. And as was mentioned earlier, I came back to Fairleigh Dickinson to get my MBA in International Business. And I really decided to do that for a couple of reasons. One is I realized when I went to school and I got my bachelor's degree, it set me apart from other people because getting a college degree kind of 20 years ago set you apart. Now it's a ticket to entry. You apply for any professional job. If you don't have a degree, they won't even look at your resume. And I say that from fact because I was a hiring manager at J&J, and if you didn't have a degree, we wouldn't consider you for any professional job. And over the past 10 years probably, and five, having an MBA sets you apart. Having an advanced degree sets you apart. So that's why I decided I wanted to go back to get an advanced degree. I also realized that the world was becoming a smaller place, which is why I got a degree in international business, because the handwriting seemed to be on the wall that we live in a global economy and it's getting more connected. So as I was going back to get my MBA, I joined a small newspaper some of you may have heard of called the New York Times. And if you're in New Jersey, it's always exciting wanting to work in New York and all the things going on there. And I have to tell you, it is exciting. How many of you, by show of hands, have worked or do work in New York City? Okay, about 20%. So you work in New York City, you come out of work. It's not, is there something to do? There's 20 things going on. Which one do I want to take advantage of? Do I want to stay here? Because there's just so many things going on. It's fun. It's exciting. The challenge is I happen to live in Princeton. And if you commute into New York on New Jersey Transit. I remember to this day my worst commute, which was on New Jersey Transit with the train stuck in Metuchen for about an hour. And if you know how you use a vacuum cleaner, if you ever put it on you, you kind of sucks your clothes up. If you've ever been on a train with the center door open as another Amtrak train goes down the center railway at about 80 miles an hour, you feel like you just want to be sucked out of that train. I mean, it's really scary. So I ended up working for the New York Times for about 5 years. And as I worked there, a couple things happened. One, we hit $1 billion in advertising sales, which was a record for any newspaper of $1 billion. They were also going to spin off the NewYorkTimes.com into a separate company. I was actually supporting HR to make that happen. And it was at the time everyone was going public. They were raising billions of dollars. And around that same time is when online newspapers happened. In fact, I remember sitting in a meeting with the publisher, and the president of the company was reporting, and he reported about the losses for NewYorkTimes.com. And it was something like $25, $50 million in losses, and we thought we were going to get crucified and grilled and beat up. And the publisher said, that's not enough. You need to lose more. And the reason he said that, because at the time, the more money you lost, the higher your valuation was when you went public. And the reason that was the case, because the investment community thought that the more you lost, the more you're investing in the business to make it more valuable down the road. But then that magic day, when I believe it was Forbes or Business Week, I forget which one, published a burn rate for internet companies. Anyone remember that article? They put an article on the burn rate of internet companies based on their cash burn rate when they will go out of business or be bankrupt. And when they published that, the reality set in that you really have to have a profit in order to keep a business running. And as that happened, the internet bubble busted. New York Times.com was folded back in. It never spun off as a separate company, and they were ready to raise $1 billion and spin it off. Online newspapers happened, and there were a couple startup companies, some of which you may have heard of, like this small one, that started giving out information for free. So why would you pay for information on the internet when you can get all the information you want for free? And to this day, unfortunately, and believe me, I subscribe to New York Times. I get it every day. We read it. As much as I'm a techie and computer person, but I like having a newspaper in front of me. But most newspapers, New York Times and others, have still struggled with that balance of how do you generate revenue from online media content when companies like this little tiny one called Google will actually give away content to people. So as I was working in, I realized that, you know, this industry isn't growing. I needed to think about what I want to do. And commuting to New York was starting to get a little old, those 2-hour commutes. So I decided I wanted to have a little better work-life balance. So as I did, I joined this other small company called Johnson & Johnson. And I'm sure everyone in here has heard of Johnson & Johnson and the consumer products that they have, the skin care, oral care, baby lotion, Johnson & Johnson, lotion, shampoo. You may or may not know that Neutrogena, Aveeno, Clean & Clear, Ambi, Tylenol, Motrin, Listerine are all J&J products. It's the largest consumer healthcare company in the world. Not only may you not know that, you may not also know that J&J Consumer actually only makes up 1/3 of the company. The largest sectors are actually in pharmaceutical or medical device and diagnostics. It's actually one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. It's one of the largest medical device companies in the world. And the reason you don't know or may not know this is J&J is one of the most decentralized entrepreneurial companies, Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 100 companies in the world. There's 250 different J&J companies, and each one is run as a separate company. And they brand themselves as a separate company, unlike a Pfizer, a Merck, that brand, when Pfizer buys a company, it becomes Pfizer. When J&J buys a company, it stays that company. These are just a small sampling of some of the J&J, 250 J&J companies. So when I joined J&J, I joined in consumer, moved over to the pharmaceutical sector with zero pharmaceutical experience. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. I was at consumer, had a great track record, had been there about 4 or 5 years, and they gave me an opportunity to join a management board of consumer with a $1 billion brand, 15 people, or go over to this small startup company called Tebotech that was developing 2 HIV/AIDS drugs for J&J as an individual contributor with only about 200 people. I chose to go there because I asked myself, when would I get a chance to go to a pharmaceutical company with zero pharmaceutical experience? So I went there, and I guess I did well because I was promoted to the vice president for this sector and managing 3 different companies as the HR leader for the infectious disease business. So as I was there, and this is just a sampling of some of the J&J companies and locations worldwide, that's when I really got a taste of an opportunity to use my international business experience, because I had international responsibility throughout the world, and realized, again, that the world is a smaller place, the opportunities that exist outside the U.S., that in many cases the growth and opportunities are really outside the U.S. more so than inside. But as J&J reorganized, when the economy fell several years ago, in 2009, myself and a business partner who I work with at the New York Times had been talking about alternative energy, and J&J reorganized, and they gave me the opportunity to stay with the company but relocate to, anyone heard of Warsaw, Indiana? I hear someone chuckling over there, so you know Warsaw. It's cornfields and farms, and not exactly where I wanted to live growing up in New Jersey and New York and Philadelphia. So it's either Warsaw, Indiana, California, or to Europe or Asia. Unfortunately, I couldn't relocate, so I decided to join a business colleague, and we started a company called Green Planet Group. And Green Planet Group is focused, as was mentioned, on really helping developing countries build infrastructure using alternative energy solutions. And we focus on a couple things: clean water, lighting, as well as electricity. And as I go through a couple of slides, I'm going to give you not only an insight of into the company, but also hopefully educate you a little bit about alternative energy and some things going on in the world. So as we formed the company, one of the things, and we had been approached by 20 or 30 different companies on products and services and things that we looked at, and we narrowed it down to a number of products. We looked at, based on the products, one was a clean water product, and I'll show you that in a minute. We looked at the need for clean water around the world, and as you look, there's a billion people around the world that need clean water. More people die from lack of clean water than all the wars combined. Half the hospital beds in the world, believe it or not, are filled with people from waterborne disease. Most of the kids that die or have nutritional issues are because of waterborne disease, because when they don't get clean water, their body can't absorb nutrition, and therefore they end up with diarrhea and nausea and everything else and all the waterborne diseases. So as we looked at it, this picture is all too common in the developing world. I mean, if you read the news right now with Pakistan, what's going on, with Haiti, what's going on there, water is, you can live without food for several weeks. You can only live without water for a day or two. So there's about 1 billion people that don't have safe drinking water. And this only shows what's reported. It's probably double its number when you look at what's really out there. So we came across a system that will turn almost any water like this into clean drinking water. From lakes, rivers, streams, it will even desalinate seawater. And it actually is run by solar power. This is where I get a chance to educate you a little bit. I'll come up here so I can see it. How many of you know about solar and how it works, by the way? Not many. Okay, when you leave out of here in the next 2 minutes, I'm going to give you an overview of solar. So this is a system. So these are the solar panels that you saw up on top. Let me go back for a minute. So here's the solar panels. There's electronics on this side, a filter system on this side. These are batteries in the bottom. And the reason I share that with you so you understand this. So the solar panels pull the sun's energy. It converts that energy to electricity. And solar panels generate DC electricity, much like in a battery. So as it converts DC electricity, it pulls it in, and there's a controller system that's patented that actually then feeds that electricity into batteries during the day and charges the batteries during the day. It then pulls the energy out of the batteries and inverts it from DC to AC and sends power to an outlet on the system to power any AC appliance, much like a 20-amp circuit. There's also a generator input in case it's stored in a warehouse and needs to charge the battery. This controller is like the brain of the system, so it sends the energy from here into the pumping system, and there's a pump controller here that actually will then pull the water and take out, this coarse filter will take out debris like leaves, grass, twigs, big stuff that's coming in. A media filter here will actually then take out sand, silt, dirt, mud, and suspended solids in the water. A carbon filter will then, and carbon is very common, it'll take out organic, inorganic pesticides, chemicals, and contaminants in the water. Specialty filter if it's high in iron or some other chemical. And then the last step is a UV filter that will kill all the germs and bacteria that's in the water. So what you have coming out is purified drinking water out of the system. So it's a very similar system as an electric system or any water utility company uses, but it's compact and it's run by the energy of the sun. The patent portion and proprietary portion is in this controller, because without the patented controller, the system would just burn up. Because what happens with solar, it's not as consistent energy as you get from the power company, and the patent controller system provides consistent energy. The controller also then, during the day, it sends the electricity it needs to run the system. It sends the extra electricity into the battery system. As the sun goes down, it then manages and regulates the electricity so that it starts pulling electric out of the battery back in to run the system. This system will actually run 24 hours. It'll generate 30,000 gallons a day of clean, purified drinking water the day it's delivered. In fact, we say 30 minutes to 30,000 gallons. 30 minutes after it's delivered, it starts pumping and purifying 30,000 gallons a day, or 5,000 gallons a day from seawater. This is actually one of the systems, as you see, closed up here. This was actually in Haiti. When the earthquake happened, there were systems down in Haiti in a warehouse, and they were pulled out. One of the systems, and the building had collapsed on it. They pulled it out, opened up the panels, and within an hour, it was pumping water and feeding water to about a dozen Red Cross organizations for 100,000 people. Right after the earthquake, it was the only water purification pumping system on the ground. In fact, right now, we've made it through 2 levels of analysis with the Clinton Foundation, and one of the finalists for actually providing water, electricity, and lights in Haiti. In fact, I was there about 2 months ago. A lot of builders are looking to build homes in Haiti, and almost every one of them are looking to build a home, put it on the ground with no infrastructure. No water, no electricity, no lights. So we put a proposal together, we submitted to the Clinton Foundation to actually work with any builder they select to build homes, and using solar power will provide street lights, water, and electricity for those builders as they put the homes on the ground, so that the people will not only have a home, but have the utilities that they deserve to have when they move in. So that's actually in Haiti. This is an example of some of the systems around the world. This is actually in Sudan. They had a contaminated borehole. They're pulling water out of there to filter it. Some of these are that's Haiti, Afghanistan, Iraq, and different places around the world. So the system's actually proven. One of the things we found out as we moved into the alternative energy space, a lot of the scientists, a lot of the inventors, they were really good at inventing stuff, really good at coming up with ideas, but they didn't have the knowledge, skills, or interest in commercializing those. Much like when I was at J&J with the pharmaceutical sector, and you have R&D folks, just leave me in the lab, let me develop the next drug, and I could care less what happens afterwards. I don't want to sell it, and I don't want to market it. Well, the same thing is in alternative energy. A lot of the scientists, inventors, and it's probably a little bit that right brain, left brain thing, they just want to invent stuff and come up with ideas and improve it, but they don't want to deal with customers and market and sell it, and that's where we add value, because we then commercialize their products and services, and we commercialize those by leveraging the relationships we have, as well as the synergy of a couple of items together. This is a sister system. This will actually pump 100,000 gallons a day strictly from the sun. So why that's important is when you look at a lot of rural areas or a lot of developing countries, if I'm a farmer and I have 5 acres, 10 acres, 50 acres, in a rural area in a developing country, I can farm the area that I can water. Well, now if I have 50 acres and I have no electricity, a system like this allows me to farm and grow crops on the entire space, because now I can provide irrigation in that whole area. Flooded areas can now pump out water in flooded areas where there's no electricity. Or we use this in combination with the other purification systems, so if we have to go down into a very deep borehole or well, they can go down 300-400 feet and actually pull the water out. So that's the water system. The other systems that we looked at and we actually commercialized, in fact, I was on the phone with someone today for a project we have with a builder putting up 1,000 homes in Senegal. This is a night map of the world. Anyone ever seen this before? What it looks like? One or two people. If you looked at the world from a satellite at night, this is what it would look like. The U.S., and these white dots are reflective of how much light there is. So the U.S. is well lit up. In Europe, it's well lit up. This is probably Japan over here. But when you look at Africa, you look at Latin America, you look at parts of China, it's completely dark at night. And one of the things we realize is a lot of developing countries don't have lights. They can't afford lights. They don't have reliable electricity. There's a number of different reasons. Well, the answer is solar-powered streetlights. Solar-powered streetlights allow a developing country. They allow an area, for example, in Haiti, where they will have more hurricanes, they may have more earthquakes. When that happened, it was pitch dark there. So if they're doing rescue, come nighttime, they have to stop the rescue efforts because it's pitch dark, unless they have lights on equipment. Solar power streetlights, once there's an earthquake, they still come on every night. Because what they do, again, 30-second educational session. Solar panels here, pulls the energy during the day. There's a battery system right here. It stores the energy during the day. Sun goes down nighttime, a sensor turns it on, it starts to pull the energy stored in the battery and sends it to the light, and you have this. Lights are rode up at night. Installation is just as simple as dig a hole in the ground, put the pole in with the light, and the light's on today. Don't need any electricity, don't need to wire anything, don't need to run any trenches. So we're actually commercializing these in a lot of developing countries around the world also. The other area, and is really three key areas, the third one is solar electric systems. Again, a lot of developing countries, people don't have electricity. In fact, most of the developing countries don't have electricity. Most of Haiti, good portion of developing countries in Asia and Africa and India. Again, here's my 2-minute commercial. Solar electric systems in a home, whether it's here in the U.S. or in the developing countries, are set up the same way. They pull energy from the sun. The difference is here, it runs into an inverter through the electrical panel, and in the U.S., it feeds the energy during the day when you're working and it's pulling all the energy from the sun back into the utility system, and it turns your meter backwards. Nighttime, you come home, and it's pulling the energy back through here because there's no energy from the solar panels. So at the end of the day, or end of the year, as they call it with net metering, you should be zero if everything worked perfectly in the U.S. Outside the U.S., where they don't have the electric poles, instead of it feeding here into the electric system, there's a battery bank here. So during the day, it pulls the energy, it's using some of it in the house, it's storing it in a battery system like you saw before. Nighttime, it's pulling the energy and feeding it back into the house so you have electricity at night. Because a lot of developing countries don't have that. So as we grew the business, we developed strategic partnerships and relationships around the world. This is just a sampling of some of the countries that we're doing business in and working in different parts of the world itself. So what lies ahead? You know, with any business, any entrepreneur in here, you have to think right from day one, if you really thought through the process, of an exit strategy. And that exit strategy could be one of a couple things. It could be grow the business, continue to grow it. At some point, you either have to pass it on to heirs, you have to divest it, give it to someone else, or you get a point where you decide to cash out, to sell the business, to give it away. When I say give it away, for something else, usually tangible. Or you let investors in. And letting investors in, as you know, is sometimes there's good and bad in that. Brings a lot of money into the company, but it also brings a lot of oversight, a lot of other opinions of how you should run the business. But either way, you have to have an exit strategy. But, you know, and some lessons learned that I went through. One is, and this was a big lesson learned and insight for us, is watch China. And I say that a little facetiously, but seriously, you know, as I got involved from a global basis and really started to understand what's going on around the world, I'm personally worried about China, or worried about the U.S. with what China's becoming. Not anything bad, it's just that they're really good at growing their business, having how many of you have been to China? Anyone here? Okay, so some of you. And for those of you who haven't been there, if you know much about China, they are very good at mass production. They're very good at focusing on different industries. I haven't been there, but from everything I've been told, with insights of people, they almost by parts of China decide to focus on certain areas. This town is going to make chairs. This town is going to make computers. And they develop a core competency, a critical mass, and a very good skill set. There's also, this happens to be an article in New York Times where they actually showed windmills coming in, and these are actually propellers from a windmill, believe it or not. That's how big they are. And a labor union was suing China because what they were saying is the government's underwriting and allowing them to enter the market by underwriting the cost so that they can come in and cost cut and come in at a lower cost, which gives them an unfair competitive advantage. And whether it's the government's underwriting it or whether it's the labor cost is really low, and there's some good and bad things in what China is doing. The good thing for them is it's fueling their economy, it's generating lots of revenue. If you watch the news this year, China became the second largest economy in the world and growing tremendously. Some people say it's a bubble that's going to bust. They've ignored a lot of the environmental laws. If you've been to China, from what I understand, one day you can look out and you can see, for miles. The next day you can't see the building next door because of the pollution and smog. You're laughing, you must know it. Because they say they have laws, they say to follow them, but they kind of wink and blink because they want to grow the business. The challenging part as a U.S. company, if you work in a global market, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to expand globally, when you compete against China, I'm using China, but it may be there's other countries that have a similar situation. China happens to be more well-known. The government manages and works with a lot of the businesses. So when you go and compete with them, you go from the U.S. and you got a great product and a great business, and you're looking to capitalize on that, you then have to finance it. And then you come back and you try and work with a bank, Exim Bank, World Bank, African Development Bank, whatever the bank or organization is, which may take months. I've been in meetings where China comes in before or after us, and their banker from the government comes in with the business leader. They say, oh, sure, we have a great product, you're interested in it, and by the way, here's my banker from the government, they'll fund the whole project, and they'll arrange the financing for you, and we can do it all at once as a package deal. So I'm hoping, I've actually met with senior executives at Exim Bank. Exim is a U.S. import-export bank for the U.S. And I've been pretty frank with them that if the U.S. doesn't do something different, 3 years, 5 years from now, it'll be too late to catch up to China and some of the things they're doing in countries around the world because, they're moving very fast up that knowledge scale. So one thing is really watch China and what they're doing. Some people say you have to learn to speak Mandarin because, they're buying places all over the world and it's another place to work. The other thing I learned is you have to show me the money. You can have the best product, the best service. We had, in many cases, millions of dollars of contracts and opportunities that we thought the hardest thing and the most challenging thing was get those across the finish line and get secure orders. What we actually found out was one of the challenging things was financing some of those, where a government said, yep, we think that's great, we want the lights, we want the water, we'll sign a contract, and by the way, in here it says you'll help us get financing. Well, we had millions of dollars of orders we couldn't close because we couldn't get the funding. We couldn't get the terms and conditions that both could agree upon. And the third thing was we live in a global economy. The world is becoming a much smaller place. The U.S. is no longer the manufacturing hub of the world, as you know. More and more that shifts around the world. As you go into the work world, as you develop your entrepreneurial skills and go into different businesses, you really have to keep in mind the global economy. The internet is a wonderful resource to allow that to happen because you can market products and services all over the world. So the boundaries of the U.S. no longer exist. Some key things that, for me, real quickly, were turning points and skills that I think were important. When I left J&J, that was a real significant turning point for me because it allowed me to get I call it a second MBA, a working MBA in international business. When I left Deluxe, it really gave me an opportunity to get exposed outside of what I thought was a job for life, staying with a company for life, realizing that there's no job security for life, no matter how good. You can have the best reviews, you can be told you're high potential, but there's no guarantee in corporate America as they reorganize. The other thing I wanted to mention as I wrap up here is some skills I thought that were really important. And as we grew our business, one of the things we really had to get our hands around is being what we call focused but flexible. We had to be very focused on what we wanted to do because we were presented with lots of opportunities and people wanted us to market their products and services, and we couldn't be everything to everyone, so we really had to be focused, but we also had to be flexible, so when there's a new opportunity coming about, you take advantage of it, and you didn't have the horse blinders on where there's something great right here, but you kind of ignored it because you're so focused. The global mindset was really important, and really good common sense, which is sometimes the most important thing, the gut feeling, good common sense of knowing what's right and what's not. So that's a little bit about my life, how we started a business, where we go, and I appreciate everything that the school has done because they gave me my first opportunity to gain that international business experience, which hopefully prepared me and gave me the foundation for where I am today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Brad. That was illuminating. No pun intended with the. And you think that just your story from going from a corporate J&J experience to Green Planet Group was impressive enough, and then you learn, I had no idea about that background, that entrepreneurial background, and some of those nuggets of wisdom. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. So we can get as many questions in as possible. Please make them very short and wait for the mic, please. Okay, there's a question back there.
Brad, you said when you were at J&J and you decided not to go on with the entertainment business and you wanted to pursue your MBA, do you think if you chose to grow the business, you would have still went back and got the MBA?
Definitely. Because I realized when I was at Deluxe, and that was actually when I decided to get my graduate degree, that I needed to have an advanced degree to set me apart. Even if I was running my own business, it doesn't guarantee anything. What it does guarantee is it opens doors for you, whether it be an entrepreneur, and when you're an entrepreneur, and if you're dealing with, and right now I deal with a lot of ministers, ambassadors, foreign government officials, one of the things I ask is, tell me about your background. And telling them you have an MBA and work for a large company like J&J opens doors and brings a level of credibility. The other thing it did is it helped me understand if I go back to corporate America, which I might do at one point, because I really enjoyed it, having an MBA sets you apart also. And right now with the economy the way it is, the job market the way it is, the MBA is what will get your resume to the top of the pile and get you that interview that, if I'm a hiring manager and I got 10 resumes, and 3 have MBAs and the rest don't, that may be the swing factor for who comes in.
You mentioned earlier that, you were talking about investments. Is Green Planet Group looking for investors?
We decided to put our own equity into the company. If you've ever started a business, then if you open it up to investors from the beginning, they want to have a say-so on how you run your business, on what your strategy is, what your tactics are, and that could slow you down unless you're in full alignment. So myself and my business department decided to invest ourselves and our capital into the business to get it started to the point that we feel comfortable bringing in outside investors.
As you decided to get into the green and sustainability thing, did you do that mostly because it was the right thing to do?
It's probably for me a little bit of both. Over the years, I've actually, and one reason I probably gravitated to HR, I like helping people. I've done a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring. In HR, you get a chance to deal with compensation issues, hiring people, promoting people. I've done a lot of nonprofit and sit on nonprofit boards just from that sense of caring. And the other part is, over the years, I've been fortunate with my career and where it's taken me through hard work and some luck probably. But I also want to give something back. So it was a natural opportunity for me to move into alternative energy and gravitate towards the developing world where we could take some knowledge and skills and experience from my career from the U.S. and leverage that to help make lives better for people in different parts of the world. So there's a little bit of both. But I have to tell you, we call ourselves good-hearted capitalists. If we couldn't make a good profit from it, we wouldn't be doing it, quite frankly. So it's kind of balancing the two.
You, excuse me, you mentioned Johnson & Johnson is an umbrella company, basically, and they're not following with Merck and Pfizer. I was just curious in your opinion, after being in Johnson & Johnson for some time, do you agree with that philosophy? Is it working compared to Merck? Is there a reason why they're doing it?
You know, if I contrast and compare J&J to a Pfizer or Merck, Pfizer and Merck is more command and control. So Pfizer buys a company, Merck buys a company, it becomes Pfizer, it becomes Merck, and what corporate says is what the rest of the company does. And the chairman or senior people at Pfizer or Merck decides overall what should be done, and everyone gets in line and follows. J&J runs their businesses very decentralized, and in fact, part of their value system is a decentralized management approach. I mean, 30-second understanding of J&J. J&J has a chairman, for Bill Weldon. He's the president, CEO, and chairman of the company overall. They have an executive committee that runs the company. That executive committee has the functionary heads for finance, for law, for HR, and IT. And then they have what's called a GOC chairman for pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and consumer. That GOC chairman then has presidents under them that run the businesses. So the GOC chairman, I mean, the corporation sets the overall strategy, some very high-level basic things. Then the chairman, for example, for consumer will set high-level things for consumer, but then individual presidents of those businesses run the business as if it was your own entrepreneurial business. When I was the VP of HR for 3 different J&J companies in Pharm, hiring, firing, promoting, we decided all ourselves. Now, we had guidelines that were given out for when someone got a promotion, this is the range you use for compensation. When you did your annual comp, this is the range. These are the core values. But the day-to-day operation and business plans and everything else, you run it as you see fit. So I don't know if there's a right or wrong between the two. It works for J&J. And there's good and bad in that because you duplicate a lot of things when you have a structure like that because you have multiple repeat functions, but it allows you to be very decentralized, make decisions closer to the end user and customer, be more adaptable, be more flexible, and adapt quicker to what the customer needs are. And it just works for them. And for me, quite frankly, I was looking at an opportunity at BMS when I went to J&J. I gravitated to J&J because of the entrepreneurial spirit I have. It was a much closer fit for me with J&J, feeling like you're running your own business. I call it's the closest thing to running your own business in corporate America.
I got a friend of mine who's starting a company in geothermal heating. I was wondering if you knew much about it, what your take was on it, and if it was an efficient solution for green energy.
You know, the reality is geothermal and all the other alternative energy solutions really provide, and it's really about cost-benefit analysis, because geothermal in the right situation and in the right location is cost effective, much like because it allows you to then maintain a regular temperature without using electricity by using the geothermal heat and cold transmission to keep a place warm or cold at a certain temperature. Much like electricity, solar electric, it's not cost effective when you compare it to what it costs to run these lights right here. The reason New Jersey is, I believe, the second largest solar electric user is because of the incentives and rebates that are allowed here. Because when you think of New Jersey, you say, well, why would New Jersey be number 2 when, you know, Florida and Texas and all the other places get a lot more sun? Because of all the rebates and incentives here. When you look outside the U.S. in a lot of developing countries, and we're doing some stuff with Department of Interior for Indian or Native American reservations that don't have any electricity and don't have any water, it's not about cost, it's about availability. So when you look in rural areas, if you think about a rural area in the U.S. or definitely outside the U.S. in a rural area, if the cost of solar electric is twice as much, but yet there's no electricity there, the alternatives are continue to live with no electricity for years and years to come, or will they run electric lines 5 miles in this direction and 10 miles in this direction when I can put solar panels on your house and give you electricity tomorrow? So yeah, geothermal, you know, same thing. One other thing I will mention about the business and alternative energy, the alternative energy field, I think, is like the computer field was 20 years ago. There's a big push from the government. There's a big push from investors. There's going to be breakthrough technology and geothermal and solar and all different alternative energy fields that will allow those to come in parity with other forms of electricity and energy. Solar electric, for example, in the next year or two, it's predicted to come to parity with electric from the electric companies because the cost of solar panels are going down, most of which happen to be made in China, about 90 some odd %. But the cost of those is going down, and efficiency is going up, because solar panels are only about 15, 20% efficient. If someone comes up with a breakthrough for solar panels that can make those 30, 40, 50% efficient, the price of electric from solar panels will actually be less than the price of electric from other sources.
Hi, Brad. I'd love to hear your pearls of wisdom about sales. You've, experienced from the inside in corporate America and as an entrepreneur, both for people who are just graduating as up to baby boomers. What would you have to say about sales?
And I'm really glad you asked that question, because one of the things I tell people when I do coaching, especially in high school and in colleges, is think about the future and think about where we've come. If you go back 15 years ago, a lot of manufacturing jobs left the U.S. And if you're a parent, you coach your kids, don't go into manufacturing. You got to get a college degree because of professional jobs. Well, then we saw over the past number of years, a number of professional jobs left the U.S. also. And more, unfortunately, live in the U.S. So you really have to think about what are the jobs that can't leave the U.S., that you need to have the face-to-face contact and interaction, and sales jobs would be one of them. You can't sell over the phone in many cases. You have to have that face-to-face interaction. A lot of service jobs, same thing. So it was a long-winded answer to your question, but if you like sales and want to have a career in sales, it's one of the careers that will be around for a long, long time. And the second point I want to make on that is when the economy is soft like it is now, when companies reorganize, they usually don't cut back on sales and marketing, because the fact is, if the sales are soft, most companies realize you cut back on sales, they're going to get even softer, so they usually leave the sales team intact. They just put higher goals and higher demands on them to go out and sell and generate revenue.
Great. We're going to have to end it there. I think, Brad, you'll stick around because there's a bunch more questions. What a way to start off this academic year. I mean, that was a really brilliant talk, some brilliant insights, and we thank you for coming, Brad. I'd like to... I'd like to call up Dean Moore to present Brad with a small token of our appreciation, show a plaque that will hang in our lobby with Brad's name. And we really appreciate you coming today. So.